also, of course, Gandhi has given very popular examples, as for instance, he was opposing the British monopolies on textiles and salt by just telling the Indian people to produce their own textiles and produce their own salt. So that was directly interfering with the thing it was concerned with. And somewhat the passive direct measures are ethically preferable because, as we have seen in the basic outline of resistance, what resistance should do, it should cause less damage and have a good chance of success. And because passive direct measures have all the benefits of indirect measures, like drawing attention, demonstrating things, but also interfere directly with the causal things they're concerned with, they're somewhat mostly more effective and somewhat ethically preferable in the general case. Although, of course, the evaluation has to be done individually for every resistance. Every certain type of resistance has a specific individual set of consequences, of course. So to sum this up a little, as we have seen, resistance is in fact, despite what the Borg say, not useless, but a very important ultima ratio to regain access to the social contract in the worst case scenario of a ruler turning into a tyrant. And it does have some legal and ethical foundations and also some cultural practices in humanity. And if we now look at resistance from a very, very basic point of view, we can see that this relies on some very basic conditions which have to be fulfilled to make resistance actually a meaningful concept. For the legal and ethical evaluation, we have to see that political measures have to be visible and intelligible to some extent, because we have to be able to discern certain political measures, political actions as illegitimate, as unconstitutional in the first place, and then we have to be able to clearly distinguish which intentions are behind there, who's involved, and so on and so forth. And so in other words, for resistance to be a meaningful concept and to decide when to resist and to see when you have to resist, politics have to be cognitively accessible. And of course, this is not a trivial demand. It's largely known as well. I mean, the free independent press is largely concerned with trying to make political measures visible and intelligible, whereas PR agencies and secret services are trying to do the opposite. So this is a very basic condition which is already involved in a certain degree of social struggle. And there's also another very basic condition which is more concerned with the practice of resistance. And for practical action, we have to realize that political measures also have to have some physical outgrowth. And in the ethically preferable case of passive direct resistance, for instance, it should be the physical outgrowth of the very measure which is being undertaken. So the action itself should be physically accessible to some degree. Of course, this might seem like a very trivial thing to say, because politics always do have some physical outgrowth. I mean, in the very last case, it would be the very politician who decides these things. So this appears to be a trivial condition, a trivial thing to state. But as we will see as soon as high technologies become involved in politics, this is not so trivial anymore. So these conditions really have to be maintained, and these conditions are important for resistance to have that as a meaningful concept. And we can state this a little, reformulate this a little into a meaningful demand by saying that political measures have to be cognitively and physically accessible. And we can see, I already stated the Free Independent Press and some other groups, activists of course as well, are engaged in a social struggle to keep politics cognitively and physically accessible already. We've also seen the forming of social groups like Free Independent Press and activists. And however, the technologists have been very absent from this social struggle as an explicit social group until now. But I believe that this cannot be upheld any longer, and that the technologists as a group should really engage in the social struggle to maintain the conditions for resistance. And I will explore this now when I will start to look at what it means if technology is being introduced in political actions. And I'm trying to this is really a research which I will do in the next 5 years in my habilitation, to try and look at political technologies, the entanglements of politics and technology. Find that very interesting. There is also talk has started on this in sociology of technology, history of technology, under the term of technologized politics, a little just over the past years. But I will try to focus more on the technologies because I'm a philosopher of technology, so that is my angle. And we'll understand these as the technologies of technologized politics. And the definition, which I have just causally stated now, will be that a political technology is a technology which is a substantial part of some political measure, and maybe standardization can be taken as an indicator for a certain technology being a substantial part. But I do agree that this is still cause, and one could argue whether a certain pencil of a specific type, which is being standardized for filling out form X, Y, Z, is in the same way substantial as a long-range nuclear missile is substantial for foreign politics. But that's still an open thing. But somewhat this is just a working definition, and the interesting question which can now be followed would be that whether the introduction of technologies actually alters political actions in any politically substantial sense. This is actually the question which I will ask myself for the next 5 years and try to go in there a little deeply. For now, I don't have really a very worked out concept. I just have a couple of ideas and this threefold dimensions, which I will just briefly present you now. Values, effectivity, exclusivity. Values in technology is a thing that the Chaos Computer Club notoriously denies. They always say that technologies are not evil, they're neutral. But in fact, I believe that technologies are never neutral. And I think one way of seeing this is that a very easy thing to approach by saying that a technology is always involved in some sort of action, some human action. We always do something with technologies. And when we do something, we have aims in our head. And when we have aims, then these aims rest on some needs and values. And needs, of course, can be reformulated as values. And as such, we find a systemic net of values and needs in every single technology by just what we be able to do with that and how it is being developed and produced. And you can see this easily in any sort of car. If you drive a Corvette Stingray, for instance, your ultimate need is not to come from A to B, because then you would probably buy a different car, but also to impress people and to show off how rich you are and how fast. So there's always a net of values and needs embodied in any technology, and even if comfort can be counted as a value, which seems to be very prevalent in current technological development. And one question which has much to do with my talk now, which I find intriguing, is whether one could try and develop a notion of a global web of values and needs and illustrate and contrast that with the global web of values and needs as they're realized by technologies. And just to give you an idea what that could be about is if you, for instance, just see how much money is being invested in the tiny little details which nobody needs in our gadgets, and you contrast that with the money which is being invested in the development of devices to clean water, which would be very substantially needed by quite a few people to actually survive, then you can see that there's a huge difference of actual values which should be pursued in technological development and which are quite asymmetric to the values which are being pursued by technological development. But that's just an idea for the future. Yeah, another thing is the effectivity of technology. Of course, what technology usually does is technology enhances certain actions, or technology enables certain actions, as in the case of flying. We wouldn't be able to fly without airplanes, so these are, of course, the standard things which technology do. They somewhat add something to our actions. And another point is also exclusivity of technology. That is, that technology of a certain step of development is only manageable by experts, and that it is, of course, only affordable by the rich or powerful, which applies in particular to greater technological compounds and stuff like that. And also the directions of development are, of course, given by those people rich and powerful enough to afford experts. And these are things which have to do with politics as well. And in which way can be seen now? We can discern some immediate dangers now if we see these effects of technology being carried over and embodied into politics, political actions. We can then see that political technologies are actually quite able to realize nasty values within political actions, and these are especially tricky when they're somewhat contradictory, as contradictory values, for instance, are control and freedom, or security and freedom, or profit and labor, because if you try to enhance the one thing, then you automatically seem to, I mean, it's not a necessity, but you seem to have to diminish the other things. So that's something which political technologies can do and which they can introduce into the political actions. Then another difficult thing they could do, of course, is that they could enhance or enable illegitimate political measures in this effectivity thing. And another thing would be that they could also be managed, owned, and developed by politically strongly biased people, which of course has been the case in the voting computer industry in the US, which has been determined by Diebold, which are strongly politically biased towards the Republicans. So this is just a brief outlook to just really state this very basic thing now, that we can say that all these things seem to point to the fact that political technologies can actually be a very substantial part of political action and can alter politics in some sense or another. So that would be a natural thing to assume, and we can now renew our demand, the demand I have stated on political actions, for the case of political technologies, that political technologies should be cognitively and physically accessible too. However, we now encounter immediate problems when we look at certain high-tech structures, when politics are actually being interspersed with high technologies. And I just want to highlight three basic structural components of high technologies. The first component is intelligence. We see intelligence, a strong increase in intelligence in our daily lives in many aspects. Another philosopher has termed this the logical malleability of technological devices, and which are being intelligent. And this has a twofold effect. The first effect is that it is of course handy for us to have devices which are able to think and to do things for us while we're away, or to interact with us. So it's quite a natural thing to develop ever more intelligence into ever more devices of our daily life. And the other effect is that our own intelligent processes, our cognitive processes, can be supported by intelligence, and thus ever more of our own intelligent processes are being technologized in a way. Like when I use this PowerPoint thing here, then that helps certain cognitive processes of mine to be visualized, and so thus I have outsourced a part of my intelligent processes into a technology. And these two effects really have the effect that intelligence is being embodied into ever more processes, daily procedures, our cognitive processes, daily life, ever more things that will be an unstoppable thing for the future. And the danger, of course, is that you never know whose intelligence actually is there in detail, because intelligence, of course, might invite foreign interests and agendas, and by this interspersion of intelligence with our daily lives, these foreign interests and agendas might just be introduced in a very subtle way. A second feature which has to do with intelligence, of course, is complexity. Complexity is insofar complicated as it makes high-tech structures or high technologies very hard to understand or to control for lay people, and sometimes also impossible to understand or control at all, which is to say that even experts will not be able to fully reconstruct what's happening in a computer down to the very last detail. Or this applies even more to the case of genetic engineering or to nanotechnology, where the basic fundamentals are not understood at all, and the complex interactions with the natural surroundings are not understood at all and cannot be controlled. And so that is a very difficult structural feature of high technology as well. And third and last difficult structure in high technology is virtuality as well, which is difficult in two respects. On the one hand, one difficulty is that your local branch of technology shares a universally accessible virtual space. When it is a communicative technology of some sort, then that means that you are accessible from the virtual space. Your local branch is accessible from the virtual space. And of course, we all know what the implications of this are as far as surveillance is concerned. And another feature of virtuality is that it also makes certain technical procedures partly unphysical, as you might not be able to physically directly interfere with somebody who's intercepting your communication because it's just happening entirely out of your bounds. And the same feature of unphysical virtuality somewhat also applies to technologies which are simply beyond our reach, such as satellites, surveillance satellites, or stuff like that. So if we now take into account these structures and we see what happens when high technology is being introduced,